Hi, everybody. Great to see everybody. We are on a tight schedule, so we will not have time to take questions from the keynote speaker, but like Ken mentioned, if you are Twitter savvy, the hashtag is DFC ideas. You can tweet thoughts and questions to that. And we have a short video we're going to watch first.
It's great to be here. It's been a great week, and the people from East Jefferson East have been so kind, and we have been working with all kinds of groups, and this group is so great because one is the focus in neighborhoods and also the future city. I think that having developed that vision is so important. As part of that vision, I want you to think for a minute, what if our children and youth could actually go places and would not have to depend on someone taking them around. And along the way, when they were going places, they could actually enjoy nature and reconnect. And what if our older adults could age in place? I find so many older adults that are terrified of the day they lose their driver's license. Not because they love cars, it's because they love mobility. They want to continue doing the things that they were doing. And we could cure obesity, doing our normal activities. Now, around the world, there are twice as many cities where people live, where more people are dying of overweight than underweight. And we could also help cure mild cases of depression and anxiety, and we wouldn't have to spend $1 out of $4 on mobility. And we had places to develop the sense of belonging, and we had more time for family and friends and connect with children and nature, as well as babies and moms and nature. This isn't dreaming. This isn't magic. This is about sustainable mobility, and it's about streets and parks and public places. And these are the topics that we're going to be dealing about tonight. So Move Detroit has been organized and led by the Jefferson East, Inc., as well as the Knight Foundation and the Wayne State University. And this is especially nice because the neighborhoods are actually the start. If we don't have good neighborhoods, we're not going to have a good city. We got to have neighborhoods that are walkable, that are bikeable, that have parks within walking distance. We got to have all the basic amenities within a 10-minute walking distance. So we're going to talk about all of these issues, and then we're going to do a workshop on these topics. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my previous life, what 8 and 8 is, a sense of urgency, sustainable mobility, elements to change, and creating alliances. Why am I talking about my previous life? Because I was commissioner in Bogota. And when I was commissioner, I'm not saying that Bogota is the ideal city. I wish. It's decades behind. But nevertheless, it shows that it's not about the money, because Bogota has maybe 1/7 the per capita income than the US. But I was doing. Now I advise mayors and decision makers in many cities, but before that I was on the other side of the table. I was doing, for example, we did over 200 neighborhood parks in the first term and another 600 in the second. This was one of the parks that we did, almost 300 acres, and the Pope came here, gave a mass for 1 million people, and in 27 years, nothing happened. Nothing happened. Then it didn't have any sidewalks, it had nothing on it. Then they planted a few trees, but there was not a bench, nothing to do in the park. Why nothing happened in 27 years? Because when you try to do things, all of a sudden you end up having some cave people showing up. What are the cave people? They are the citizens against virtually everything. But then I was reminded, I learned that the citizens are paying us every other week. It's to get things done, not to find excuses why things cannot be done. So in the government, people got to become champions at finding solutions to the problems and not problems to the solutions. And then we got to move forward. So it was like this for 27 years, and then it was like this after one term. And we did a lot of these children's playgrounds and areas for people to walk and run, and gigantic playgrounds and areas for events and concerts, wave pools. So it's quite exciting, sidewalks and bikeways, and think that the parks is about public spaces, it's about use, it's about activities. The best parks are not the ones that win the most awards for design. The best parks are the ones that have the best uses, day and night and weekdays and weekends and winter and summer. So it's not about awards or anything like that. And it was always linear parks. I love linear parks because you get linear parks and you connect neighborhoods through the linear parks. High income, low income, residential areas, commercial areas. So linear parks are magnificent. This one was 20 miles. We crossed the city through these 20 miles, starting in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods of the city, and we always separated pedestrians and cyclists and created restaurants and wayfinding, and we continue. And as we were crossing the city, even through some of the wealthiest golf courses, and had lots of fights to get it through there. And this is where we ended up. At the end, one of the poorest areas, there was before and there was after, creating all a linear park around it and all the water system. This very poor area, they didn't even have paved streets. So the linear parks are really great. But it's not only about these big parks. I also love these smaller ones in the neighborhoods, because that's why it's so important. Even more when the neighborhoods are so poor, because then the parks, they play such an important role of connecting, of developing that sense of belonging, that sense of community. In the neighborhood park, that's where we meet the parents of our children's friends. That's where we develop solidarity, so then the neighborhoods become safer. Because when something is happening on the street, if you know the next door neighbor, you go out to help. When you don't know anybody, something is happening and you close the doors and you stay inside. So the neighborhood parks are so critical and so important. We got to decide, are we going to do streets for cars or parks for children? Public space. The public space is the symbol of equality. Public space is a symbol of democracy. We go to the public space and we are all equal in the public spaces. No one cares if you have an original Nike shirt or a fake Nike shirt. You have as much fun in the public space. After I was commissioner, one of my brothers became mayor, and this is what the Japanese Corporation Agency were promoting: elevated highways, $10 billion. He said no. This was what the transportation system looked like. And in 3 years, he built a bus rapid transit. By the way, when you are doing here in Detroit, the M1 or any bus rapid transit, it's so important to improve the street facade and the sidewalks and the bikeways and all the parks that go along, because you will never invest so much money on that street as when you are doing a project like the M1, light rail or bus rapid transit. By the way, this bus rapid transit moves more people than 90% of the subways in the world at 1/20 of the cost. But then you gotta see how to link. Public transit will never pick you up in front of your house and drop you in your place of destination. So public transit in Detroit, we needed to good frequency all across the city, but also we need to have linkages with walking and cycling. We built 174 miles of protected bikeways and went from 28,000 people to almost 500,000 people in 3 years. And these were some of them. So it is doable. I mean, it was in some of the areas, it was so poor that it's hard for you to imagine in Detroit, even in your worst nightmares. But look at the levels of poverty, and look at how it changes good quality sidewalks and bikeways. Why do we need good quality bikeways and sidewalks? Part of it is because it's going to be safer, but just as important, because we need to dignify the pedestrians. We need to dignify the cyclists, and that's almost more important. And this is so also we got to be consistent between what we think, what we say, and what we do. And that's what was taking place. By the way, throughout the night, when I talk about walking, I'm really talking of anybody that moves at the speed of the pedestrian, including people on wheelchairs or older adults with walkers and so on. We did the ciclovia, which is something that could work really nice in Detroit. What is the ciclovia? In North America, we call it open streets. Basically, we open the streets to the people and close them to cars. On Sundays, we do a network. When I became commissioner, there was a small program of a few miles and a few thousand people, and in 3 years, we turned it into 75 miles and more than 1.3 million people every Sunday. And we interconnected the poorest neighborhoods with the wealthiest neighborhoods, and it's like an exercise in social integration. Because all of a sudden you get the poor and the rich and the tall and the short, the skinny, the fat, everybody. But not everybody wants to walk or bike or skate. So along the road, there's aerobics and Tai Chi and Cha-Cha-Cha and whatever you want. All around physical activity. It's physical activity. That's why we're working with the Knight Foundation and with the Robert Wood Foundation on how to promote it across the U.S. So that, and when I say about health, it's not only physical health, it's about also mental health. For example, can you imagine someone on a wheelchair, or someone blind, or someone that, or an older person on a walker, with that kind of stuff? All of a sudden, they're on a street, no cars, and it's almost paradise. So we need to do it. We need to create these kinds of ambiances everywhere. We need to have respect for people, and it's so much fun. You don't need money to invest in arenas or gymnasiums. You don't need money for capital. It's only operational. And then you have it working. And it's great. In Los Angeles, the city of angels, also the city of cars, now we have open streets. It's called Ciclavia in LA. We're working with Mayor Eric Garcetti, and now he is doing it every month of the year. And the goal is next year to do it every week. And Portland and many other cities. So we gotta work on how to make it happen in wonderful Detroit. Because this changes mindset. When New York, we're gonna do a lot of changes on their streets. Then they said, we need to change the mentality of the people in the Department of Transportation. We need to change the mentality of the citizens. These were the kind of changes they were gonna do. It was dangerous for cyclists, cars on both sides. So they built a bikeway. These are the kind of things that we could, by the way, this is why tonight, keep in mind, it's not about the money. There are not technical issues. To go from this to this, it's not about the money. It's not a technical issue. It's a political issue. That's why everybody has to get involved. And I thank all of you for being here. This is what they were doing. And be bold. In New York, if you had told anybody in New York 8 years ago that Times Square was going to be pedestrian, they would have thought you were crazy. Well, they did it. They were bold and they made Times Square pedestrian, and they were having people doing yoga and all kinds of things in Times Square. But it wasn't just these big changes, also lots of small ones, such as improving these areas for pedestrians, making it safer for people walking. In Detroit has the most pedestrians killed of any city in the U.S., over 500,000 people. That has nothing to do with the economic crisis. That has nothing to do with bankruptcy. That has to do with leadership. That has to do with creating a city for people. So we need to create city for people as our top priority. And this is about cycling, improving cycling. So New York, they did open streets, not on any street, on the most iconic street, Park Avenue, 8 lanes. Who would have thought 8 lanes, 4 lanes on each way, and people were going to be painting and drawing and riding their bicycles? It's so exciting. By the way, you see the cars are going by because you don't close down the city. All the major intersections stay open. So some people say, oh, it's like a marathon. No, it has nothing to do with a marathon. I love marathons, but it's not, because when you're going to do a marathon, you need to be in shape. So you need to train. It's elite athletes. This one, anybody. You can be in shape, you cannot be in shape. You can come out for half an hour, for 10 minutes, for 5 hours. And also, you don't shut down the city, so it's something that works out very, very well. This is the Commissioner of Transportation, the leader, Janet Sari-Khan, a fantastic leader, now in Toronto. And one of the persons that you're going to see, Emily Monroe, is in the back. She's the executive director of 880. She's the champion of open streets in Toronto. So we're moving. Paris, who would have thought Paris, the people in France, sometimes you think they're a little bit snobby. They're not. Or they might be, but then we can be snobby in Detroit too. In the summer, from the middle of July to the middle of August, they turn this highway into a people place. Look, a highway. Who would have thought in the middle of the highway people getting massage and sunbathing? But then they say, why only one month of the year? Why don't we do it throughout the year, the streets? So they went from Paris Plage to Paris Respire, and now they have open streets 52 Sundays of the year, even in the middle of the winter, and they do it from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It looks nice. So Detroit, we should do it from May to September. Maybe for the first year, we can do it 1 a month, and the second year, weekly. But some of this was when I was in Bogota. Now I'm with the 880. Also, I'm the founder of the board of, I'm chair of the board of 880, and I'm also the chair of the board of World Urban Parks. Go to the website, and hopefully some of you will become members, worldurbanparks.org. And 880 Cities. It's a great organization with a fantastic message. What's 880 Cities? Through 880 Cities, I've worked in more than 200 cities around the world, going to many neighborhoods, like the ones here, learning from all of you. 880 Cities is not about walking or cycling or parks or streets or sidewalks. It's about how can we create successful cities where we're going to have healthy communities, healthy neighborhoods in every sense of the word, and we're going to have happier people enjoying their parks, their public places. And when we are in different neighborhoods, people always say, Gil, is this intersection safe? Can my children walk to school? Can my grandparents ride their bike to get eggs or milk? You don't have to be a transportation engineer to look at an intersection. 3 simple steps. Step number 1, think of a child that you love around 8 years old. Can be your son or daughter or grandchild or next door neighbor. Once you have that boy or girl in your mind, step number 2, think of an older adult that you also love around 80 years old. And when you have the child and the older adult in mind, then go to step number 3. Would you send them across that intersection? Would you send them walking to school or cycling to the park? If you would, it's because it's safe enough. If you would not, it's because it's not. And we need to do it better. What if everything that we do in Detroit, in each one of our neighborhoods, let's think of the neighborhood, of the street corner or the neighborhood park. What if that sidewalk, that crosswalk, that school, that community center had to be great for an 8 and an 80? It's not 8 to 80. It's 8 and 80 as an indicator species. If it's good for the 8 and it's good for the 80, it's going to be good for everybody from 0 to 100. We need to stop building cities as if everybody was 30-year-old and athletic. We need to build great cities for everyone. That is the concept of 880 cities. But we need to move fast. We need to develop a sense of urgency because there are so many changes. The population is changing very, very fast. In the U.S., the population is going to grow by 110 million people in the next 40 years. That's according to the U.S. Census Bureau, which is great for Detroit because Detroit is trying to reverse the people living. And of course, it's a lot easier, it's a lot more possible if the U.S. population is growing. It would be a bigger challenge if the population of the U.S. was stable, but no, it's growing. In the U.S., we're going to have to build 40 million homes in the next 40 years. So how are we going to do them? How are people going to get around? Are we going to have every citizen in the U.S. a park within walking distance? Are we going to have small schools with walk-to schools? Are we going to have big schools that the catchment area is bigger and then it's drive-to schools? Also, the population is living longer. It's living much longer. Imagine this, the new 65. If we think of the people that have lived 65 or longer in the history of humanity, half are alive today. Half. It's incredible that half are alive today. It's new. And what are they doing? You know, we got this mentality. We say, oh, people turn 65 and they leave Detroit and they go to Florida to play shuffleboard. No, they stay in Detroit. We build a nice city for people over 65. And they are not retiring, they are rehiring, they are learning other activities. They got 30 more years to live. They are learning how to paint, they are learning, they are being activists, advocates, they are participating in community activities. Actually, we're going to double the population over 65 in the U.S. Today we got 43 million, we're going to go to 84 million. So we should create an army of baby boomers that want to transform our cities and make it safe for everybody. Also, people are living in cities like Detroit, all around the world. The U.S., over 80% of the people live in cities already. And all the new population is going to live in cities. But in cities, there are some things that we need to improve. For example, we know that Detroit is going through some challenges, but it's not only Detroit. We look at Cleveland. Look at this. If you are born in one part of the city, your life expectancy is 64. If you are born in another part of the city, it's 90. 26 years difference. What have people done to be born in an area where they're going to live 26 years less? And it's not Cleveland. You go to Washington and you find the same. You go to New Orleans, you find the same. It doesn't make any sense. And you go to those neighborhoods where the life expectancy is 25, 30 years less than other areas, they don't have grocery stores. Actually, they got 4 times more convenience stores selling garbage. There is no healthy food. The parks are in horrible condition. The crosswalks are terrible. It's unsafe. I don't know what's worse, that happens or that so many people think that's normal. Oh, those people, they don't make it, is because they don't have an effort. They don't have a work habit. My God, be born there. So there are more symptoms of urgency. 27% of the trips are less than a mile. Half of the trips in North America are less than 3 miles. They're not that long. It's half of the trips. So half could be done on a 20-minute bike ride, or a third could be done on a 20-minute walk, but very few are done walking or cycling. Actually, we need to work on this walking. Why walking? Because from the point of view of vulnerability, there is no one as vulnerable as the pedestrian. If pedestrians had clout, we would be plowing the sidewalks before the roads. And that's what they do in many countries. In many countries, it starts to snow, they plow the sidewalk, then the bikeway, then the sidewalk, then the bikeway. The third time around, then they go sidewalk, bikeway, and road. But it's about priorities. Why is it that walking is so important? Because that's how we were created. Just like the birds, they fly, or the fish, they swim, and the deer, they run. People, we walk. We walk. The children in Korea, or the youth in Johannesburg, people walk everywhere. People walk in the summer in Rio, or in the winter in Michigan. When we walk, it's so great, because we're walking, and we use all our senses. We're walking, and all of a sudden we see the children playing, and we hear the birds singing, and we go in front of a coffee shop, and we smell the aroma. And also we ride bicycles. Actually, cycling is almost like a more efficient way of walking, but both are very similar. We see eye to eye. We don't have any motorized. And cycling is not just for the 20 to 50 men in spandex. Cycling is for everybody. The little kid learning how to balance, or the older adult on the trike. Also, we got to invest in public transit. We need public transit all over. Every neighborhood needs to be connected. It's not a good neighborhood if you don't have public transit within a 10-minute walking distance. So this is absolutely critical to have a great city. Investing in public transit. And not only Detroit, but even the smaller communities of Michigan. Yesterday I was with someone from a small community of 10,000 people. Maybe they don't need a train, but they need a bus, or 2 or 3. And I know sometimes people say, oh, buses, we don't like buses. It's not only in Detroit. This is in Malmö in Sweden, and some people had issues with the buses. So what did they do in Malmö? They put a nose on the bus. They cover the wheels, and now they look like a train. And people love it, and they change the name. So when you do your BRTs, don't call it bus something. Make up a name. In Bogota, we call it Transmillennium. And in Las Vegas, they call it the Max. People are getting on the Max. And people say, I'm taking the Max, and I'm transferring to a bus. So they see it as 2 different things. Walking, cycling, and transit, they gotta be best friends. I'm not saying that the end of the car industry is taking place, but the way we use cars is being changed very, very fast. So we gotta improve walking, cycling, and transit. People walking has to be the priority. Why? Who came walking tonight? Raise your hand if you came walking. 2, 3. The rest of you, your nose is gonna get bigger. Everybody came walking. Everybody. I don't see any cars in this room. I don't see any bicycles or buses. Every trip begins and ends by walking. We are all pedestrians. Each one of us has to become an activist to have walk safe, to make walking safe. Everyone. We walk to the car. We walk to the transit. We walk to the bicycles. We walk to places. Everything begins and ends by walking. So walking should be our priority. But in the U.S., it hasn't been. Last year, over 75,000 people were hit by cars. Actually, in the U.S., in the last 10 years, 16 times more people walking have been killed by cars than natural disasters. 16 times more pedestrians. It doesn't make sense. Detroit has the highest pedestrians deaths than any city over 500,000. So we got to improve walkability. How do we improve walkability? First, we got to slow down the cars. 20 miles or less in all residential areas. On the arterials, it can be higher, but in residential, let's make it 20. Not because 20 is plenty, sounds nice, but because if you get hit by a car at 20 miles, there's only 5% probability of being killed. If you get hit at 40, it's going to be over 80%. And there are many, many studies that show the same numbers. So we got to slow down. By the way, many cities around the world are already doing that. In the UK, already more than 14 million people have voted to change the speed. This is also because not only you're not going to be killed, but it's going to be so much more enjoyable. So more people are going to walk. When we are walking, if the cars are going by at 20 miles an hour, we feel safe. We enjoy the walk. We stop and talk to the neighbor and talk to the retail. But if the cars are going by at 40, 50, 60, it's not an enjoyable walk. I mean, in front of the schools, we got 20 miles an hour in front of the schools. Why? Because it works. But do we want children to be safe only in front of the school or everywhere? We want them to be safe everywhere. So the 20 mile is good for the health and the business and everything. So 20 miles is very important. In Toronto, 2 days ago, on June 22nd, unanimous, the councilors of all of the downtown Toronto voted, as of September 1st, 223 miles of roads are going to become 20 miles an hour. 223 miles. It's great. Also things, that's why I'm saying it's not technical issues. In the neighborhoods, every neighborhood, all the roads in the neighborhood, we need to slow down. Also so that the cars will not be cutting really fast through your neighborhood so that they avoid the arterials. No, if they want to go fast, go to the arterials. Also, in the crosswalk, if we have a small island, we eliminate 56% of the accidents. So all of the crosswalks should have a small island so that people, if they cannot cross in one light, then they stop and they continue crossing. We also got to improve cycling. And when we're going to improve cycling, we got to have common sense, such as this kid, clear priorities. I mean, some cities are trying to do things right, but things that don't really work a lot. So I told you a few things about Toronto, but this cycling is not really good in Toronto. We do these sharrows. We have the cyclists on the other side of the parked cars, so the cyclists are protecting the parked cars instead of the parked cars protecting the cyclists. And we do signage, and we do bicycle parking, and we do lockers, and we teach and maps and things. This doesn't get any more people cycling. It might make it nicer for the 2% cycling, but it doesn't get more cyclists. So it just feels good for elected officials and staff. So let's not waste energy on those things. That is like getting a saddle before the horse. No, we got to get the horse first. What are the horse? One is we need to lower the speeds in the neighborhoods. So everything I said about walking at 20 is the same thing for cycling at 20. And second, we need to create a grid of protected bikeways. Separate the pedestrians, the cyclists, and the cars. And if the city doesn't have the political will or the money to do a permanent separation, you can do a temporary separation, such as these ones. So there are many, many ways to do it. This is Paris, also a permanent separation. But there are many like this one in Vancouver. It's temporary. But there has to be a physical separation between the cyclists and the cars, or else people are not going to bike. They're not going to feel safe. So in your neighborhood, in the small streets, let's lower the speed. And as soon as you enter the arterials, you got to have. Sometimes we do what is hard. We get the space for the cyclists, and then we paint a line. And then the cyclists continue going on the grass because they're not going to go if the only thing between them and a car is a painted line. So let's enhance. Don't just paint the line. Enhance that line with some plastic bollards. And then it's going to be totally different. So those are the two things. We got to create a minimum grid. This is what is happening in East Jefferson. It's so great. Finally, you're going to get these protected bikeways, and people are going to see what it is that you are talking about, but then you need to complete it. Come on, Jefferson, all the way to the downtown and connect it with the rest. We need a minimum grid throughout Detroit. A minimum grid that connects origins and destinations. Because you are not going to bike if now 20% of your trip is safe, but the other 80% is in the middle of the cars. So once you have a connectivity, it is like a power grid. Or a water grid. We need a citywide power grid. We need a citywide water grid. We need a citywide bicycle grid. And walking and cycling is not a frivolity. Some people think it's chic, because they see our friend Leonardo DiCaprio. Every time he gets a new girlfriend, which is almost every other month, he takes him on a bike ride. This is like a test. If you want to go out with Leonardo, you better learn how to bike. But then even the mayor of London, look at this, we got to have the mayor of Detroit going out and cycling. So maybe invite Kelly Brook to go with him. These people, they need a bigger bike every month or every year because they have a new kid every year. But cycling is not just a trend. Cycling is not just chic. Cycling is very important. It's not a joke. So walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for most people. Walking and cycling is the only individual mode of mobility for every child and youth. You can be the children or youth of the wealthiest family in Detroit. If you're under 16, your only individual way of mobility is to walk and bike. So walking and cycling has to be a right. The right to safe and enjoyable mobility. It's very, very important. Unless you think that only those that have the money and the desire to drive a car have a right to individual mobility. And if we take away the word individual, then walking, cycling, and public transit should be a right. That's why we're talking about democracy and human rights and equality and sustainability, because everything is linked to everything. But why are we talking about this sustainable mobility? Because of the benefits. We're going to have cleaner air. They have fewer gas emissions. And we're going to improve mobility for everybody. And we're going to have economic development because we say, oh, let's buy local. Yeah, when you are on a public transit or walking or cycling, how much can you carry? For 2 or 3 days, so you buy local. When you are on a car, you buy for 2 or 3 weeks, so people go to the big box stores. It's going to be healthier also. Is this what the future looks like? We have a huge crisis of obesity in the U.S. 1 out of 3 people is obese, and if we don't do something about it, it's going to go to 44% in 15 years. And people say, it's always been like this. Don't believe it's always been like this. 20 years ago, we didn't have any state above 20% obesity. Today, we don't have any state below 20% obesity. It's getting worse and worse all the time. So we got to work on calories in and calories out. In calories in, we got to work with the schools and improve the menus. And actually, in the schools, we need to go and redesign the playgrounds. That has so much to do with the neighborhood. The schools in each neighborhood should be like a neighborhood hub where we have the school open. We don't want to have the schools at 4 o'clock closing the playgrounds and the sports fields. They should be open to everybody, Saturdays, Sundays, over the summer. Who built the schools? Everybody, the citizens. We should have gardens in the schools so that the children get their hands dirty and then they get the earth and the soil and they learn where the fruits and vegetables come from. And also we should have farmers markets in every neighborhood. But we also got to work on the other side of the balance and do 30 minutes of physical activity because that is the wonder drug. And finally, some people might say, I don't care about the health or the environment. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? Well, people don't have money for university or for vacations or even to go to dinner with their family. What are they doing with the money? Well, they have cars. The 2-car households are spending 20 to 30% on mobility. And the people that are poorer are spending 40 or 50%. I got 5 people there saying to me that I got 5 minutes. So I'm going to speak five, okay. But this is very important. If anything to keep in mind is this. This is correct. Actually, so $1 out of $4. Actually, in Detroit, because right now the income level is lower than that's for the average in the U.S. In Detroit, it's even worse. $1 out of $3. 32%. The people in Detroit are spending 32% on mobility. It's huge. Can you imagine to spend $1 out of $3 of the income on mobility, the people that have cars and don't have money for anything else? So that's why we need to have great walking, cycling, public transit to get to places. If you want to have 5 cars, go ahead. But if you don't want to have one, you should be able to get around without having a car. That should be like a social right. You would be spending only 5% on mobility. Instead of 32, Imagine, that is as if someone had won the lottery. That out of your income, 32 out of $100 of your income is going to mobility. And now only 5. So all of a sudden you got $27 out of 100 that you didn't have before. Every year. 27 this year, and the next, and the next, and the next. And it's great for the local economy, it's great for the neighborhoods, because then people, what are they going to do with that money? They're going to go to the restaurants, and they're going to improve their garden, and they're going to improve their house, so they're going to go to the local stores and fix it. So there is nothing that governments could do that have a higher impact economically than allowing people to downsize from 2 cars to 1 or from 1 to 0. And it will be great for the community. It's about how do we want to live. We dream that this is how we want to live, and then we go out and build this. We are not consistent. This is Florence, Italy, all of Florence, and one intersection of a highway in Atlanta at the same scale. The street, we're doing a lot of work in LA. In LA, the streets cover the same space as twice the area of San Francisco. All of the streets that are paved in the US will cover the area of Georgia. So, and with regards to parks, the public spaces, this neighborhood park is so great. Sometimes people say, should we be investing in neighborhood parks or in city parks? Both, because they satisfy different needs. In the neighborhood park, that's where we develop the sense of community. That's where we meet the parents of our children's friends. That's also where the kids, these are going to be the future engineers. They're going to develop their muscle strength and coordination and language and cognitive learning. But they're not going to be able to play soccer on the neighborhood park, so they need the medium-sized park. And we also need the big ones. Public spaces are so critical. I was in Chicago last year during the World Cup. Where did I go see the US? I went to Grant Park. And that's what they were doing in Korea and in Colombia, as well as in Germany when Germany won. But it's only not about sport, not only sports. Politics, Occupy Wall Street. A few months ago, the umbrella revolution in Hong Kong, where was it? In the public spaces, Jesuit Charlie in Paris. And the nice thing is that here, everybody's equal. You go to that public place, no one cares what race or ethnicity or income or background you have. Everybody's equal there. And it's not only about politics. Here we got 2 million people in Rio. It wasn't during the World Cup, it was 3 months before the World Cup. What were they doing, these 2 million people? The Pope went there, and he was giving a mass for 2 million people. It's amazing. So public spaces create, and it doesn't have to be big public. Look, a neighborhood can have these stairs, and all of it. Imagine a neighborhood, and one family does each one of the stairs, and they put up their initials. You develop that sense of belonging. It could be so magnificent, and building that neighborhood cohesiveness that we need. It's totally transformative what they can do. And yes, here, Campus Martius, I love it, but we need to have Campus Martius throughout Detroit, not just in the downtown with the big offices. But this is a nice example. I love this, the chairs, people do all kinds of things. Then I realized that these two are really in a big fight. So maybe, if the body language means something, so let's pass. Because then they're gonna sue me for taking that photo. So all kinds of things. It's clear there was. So since they told me 5 minutes and now they said 2, then we're gonna move to the 5 elements to change. One, we need to have urgency. We need a sense of urgency now. Also, we need political will. What do we mean by political will? People say cities don't change. No, cities do change. Melbourne was horrible 30 years ago. Would not have been in the top 500 cities. Today, even they made fun of themselves. It's an empty, useless city center. And then they did a lot of the things that you can do in each one of your neighborhoods. What did they do? They put art. But art not for the cars at 60 miles an hour, art for people walking at 3 miles an hour that you can see and touch and look and so on. They planted trees. Look what a street looks without any trees and the same street with trees. You can plant trees in any of your neighborhoods. And that the trees are almost the link between the environment and health and so many things. They also invested in public transit. It was very critical. In some places, the public transit, like the M1, they take away the cars, and it's only for people walking and the public transit and so on. They improved the public spaces. They had these laneways that were dark and dirty, and look how they were transformed. Not 1 or 2, dozens and dozens and dozens of these laneways. So it was so great. It was fantastic. partnering the public sector and the private sector. No one wanted to live downtown, and now everybody wants to live downtown in Melbourne. They don't need a car, so then they save that money, so they can even pay higher rent because it's something that is great. So we need to work on those things. Nice. The street furniture has to be nice, and how they involve. Actually, one anecdote, I'm really worried because they're telling me now 1 minute, but this is important because the street furniture in the neighborhoods need to build community. People, I asked them, how much do you rent this for? It's not, if you rent it for $1,000, they say, no, it's not. In the public space, it's not about making money. The public space is about how to build community. So we tell this person, we're not going to charge you $1,000, we're going to charge you only $100. But you are very important because you are using the space that belongs to all of us, the public space. Whether we're giving you a permit to do shoe shining or to do flowers, but the city is not in the, we need to erase the mentality of giving permits. So it's not giving a permit. It's telling them, highlighting their self-esteem and say, you are very important. So you're going to have this, you're going to help us. If you see anything that is wrong in the area, you have to let us know, you have to report. Also, you need to keep this area clean. But also, you have minimum hours. You need to open Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 7 a.m., close at 8 p.m. But Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, you got to open 24 hours. Why 24 hours? Because all of a sudden I came here at noon, and it was like this at noon. Came back at 7 p.m., and then at midnight. So every other block, they have things like flowers or fruits or other activities, and you feel safe when you are walking because you are walking and you have these places full of lights with a person inside and a telephone and an alarm, and then the people walking feel safe. And it's cheaper than having police. So we got to learn from this. 3, we need leadership. Leadership everywhere. We need leadership in the neighborhoods, in the schools, everywhere. We need doers. Like the mayor of Chicago, that in the first 30 days, he built the first protected bikeways. So this is not a technical issue or financial, it's political. So my message in Detroit, please, it's not about ready, aim, fire. You have had so many consultants and so many studies, and you've been planning so much that now it has to be ready, fire. As long as you know more or less where you are going, you need to do, because otherwise cities stay ready, aim, and they never fire. They say, oh, there is some concern. There will always be concern. Change doesn't happen by consensus. If you want change to be unanimous, you have to water down change so much that it's not going to happen. You need to listen honestly, but then you got to move. And also we need citizen engagement. And citizen engagement is very important because the citizens, they give you so many great ideas, especially about public spaces, because keep in mind, successful public spaces. I see governments all over that invest millions building parks. It's easier to find the millions to build a park than to find the thousands to make it work. But the public space works is if there's things to do. So get all the citizen engagement. So I'm just going to end by saying, let's think outside the box. We got to really create broad alliances. We got to create between the private and the public and the NGOs. And the private, in the public sector, elected officials. At the city level, at the state level, at the federal, in the public sector. Public sector, not just planning and transportation, get involved public health. And in the Board of Education, and the environment, and tourism, and the community. The community, the activists, and the media, and the business, the neighborhood associations. How do we get all 3 of them working together? By developing a shared vision and a sense of urgency. So I think, just a final message, keep in mind, it's not about walking, riding bicycles, or using public transit. It's not about parks or streets. It's about creating vibrant cities and healthy communities, healthy neighborhoods, interconnected healthy neighborhoods, and where people are going to live happier, enjoying their parks, their public spaces. I mean, I know that you got some challenges, but more than challenges, you got a wonderful opportunity. So I wish you all the very best. Thank you.